and welcome to another episode of the Healing Lyme Summit 2.0. I'm your host, Dr. Mariah Hinchy. And in this episode, we're exploring the groundbreaking use of IV delivered platelet rich plasma, or PRP, with TruDOSE technology. TruDOSE is an advanced approach that enhances the body's natural healing potential. We're going to discuss how this therapy is helping individuals with chronic infections like Lyme disease and supporting children with autism spectrum disorder, as well as PANS-PANDAS, from the perspective of understanding the cell danger response. Here to discuss the benefits of this amazing therapy is its inventor, Tapley Holland. Tapley is the creator of TruDOSE technology, which is a patented intelligent software testing platform that solved the long-standing dosing inaccuracy problem within the field of regenerative medicine. This technology led to uncovering the healing benefits of infusing dose-specific platelets back into the bloodstream, otherwise known as TruDOSE IV platelet therapy. Since 2018, TruDOSE technology and IV therapy have treated and reversed thousands of patients with unsolvable symptoms and disease conditions. Welcome, Tapley. Tell our listeners a little bit more about how you developed this technology.
Well, I have a background in stem cells, for over 20 years. And I just saw that, listen, that we have this ability to heal ourselves from cells within our body, to self-heal. But the problem that I was seeing over and over was, why have we yet to progress the scientific understanding? And at the very simplest level, it's because we take these therapies and we don't personalize them to the patient and whatever condition they're dealing with. We essentially treat everybody the same way and expect the same outcome results for different disease conditions. And we all have different biology. I just simply said, we need to figure this out. I took software and I solved that problem, and unexpectedly uncovered the benefits of what would happen when you do this intravenously, which pretty much changed my entire world.
As well as that of many, many others.
Yeah. No,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so today we're going to kind of look at this through the lens of the cell danger response as a way to try to convey to our listeners like what's actually happening inside the body with this therapy. So before we get into that, take a minute and explain to our listeners what the cell danger response is.
So the cell danger response is a term that was coined by Dr. Navio and many others before him that was called different things to describe what happens to the cells, the most basic element of our body, when we encounter a stressor event, an emotional encounter, a virus, a broken bone, anything that happens to our body. At the very fundamental level, the cells that operate everything in our body, they go into a mode of self-survival and only looking to protect themselves. So an individual cell that was once communicating with trillions of other cells in the body, creating, the body's balance, you've now encountered a broken bone, or maybe you saw your parents get into an emotional fight with one another, and every cell in that body sees that, senses that, and they go into a mode of self-survival. Now what happens? No cells are communicating, and they won't come out of this mode of self-survival until they know that the body has told them, hey, the coast is clear. The problem that I'm fixing right now, in case it was a bone, or maybe it was a traumatic brain injury, or maybe it was, say, bad food that you ate, until that problem is fixed, I will let you know when to come out of this danger response. And the longer that this problem goes unsolved, the cells in the body will remain in that danger response. That means that they will reduce oxygen, they will reduce or release energy into the bloodstream, and they will reduce all types of functions as a mode of self-preservation, and really because the cells don't know if it's a virus that's entered their body, if it's a bacteria, or is it a broken bone? Now, maybe the bone in the arm knows, hey, I encountered a broken bone, I need to fix myself. But the cells in the foot, they just know something's happening, go into survival. So in the case that it is a virus, what's the one thing you want to do as a cell? Let's throw every bit of energy out in the bloodstream just in case it was to take me over. And if it did, then it's not going to really live that very long. If it was, if I reduce oxygen, which our cells do, then that makes it a very uninviting environment, say for bacteria, probably won't live very long. So it is a really innate intelligence that our cells have as a reaction to things that might encounter and happen in the body. But the longer this occurs, it's a bad situation.
And so, further explain how and why certain treatment modalities might actually, for lack of a better word, like freak the cell out even more and shut it down instead of having like the wanted or desired or expected response that that particular treatment modality should bring out in a patient.
So let's take, for example, like one you're very familiar with, Lyme, right? Bacteria, all types of things just collaborating with one another to make a person really sick. Well, if our cells in our body, they purposely reduce oxygen consumption and they throw ATP in the bloodstream as a self-innate defense mechanism, what is the one thing that we know about all these different diseases that are chronic? They have mitochondrial dysfunction,
Mhm.
right? And we know that these patients are hypoxic. Our natural inclination is to say, I got to fix that mitochondrial problem, got to give you energy. And well, let's do things like hyperbaric or exercise with oxygen therapy. I got to increase the oxygen load, which is totally logical, but quite possibly is that doing something the body's not ready for yet, right?
Right.
It's saying, hey, listen, I'm not ready for that yet. There's a reason why I've dumped a lot of energy in the bloodstream. So doing things like hyperbaric oxygen when a patient is when they cannot move things, they can't detox things, they have a high infectious pathogen load, quite possibly doing hyperbaric, which is a phenomenal therapy. I'm totally an advocate for it. Doing hyperbaric at certain stages of one's disease state might have an opposite reaction that they were wanting versus giving hyperbaric, for example, in a disease state when you have lowered the infectious load, taking herbals and tinctures, different types of things to kill things. When you have when you've gotten the detox pathways moving, now the liver's working better, things can move out. When you've gotten that patient into that mode, then hyperbaric totally becomes an option.
Right. And I'm a huge fan of hyperbarics. We have an H-bot in my office that we use with patients. But I think, to your point, different modalities are best suited at the appropriate time. And I think that that goes into no matter what treatment we're talking about. And I feel like, a lot of times I will talk about doing the groundwork, getting the body prepared to receive the treatment.
Yeah.
And I think that's true in most cases. The simple example that if a patient has a bunch of nutrient deficiencies, and these are the various nutrients that are needed, let's say, to run phase one, phase two of the liver's detoxification pathways, right? And being able to detox. If we don't have these nutrients that we need, and we go in and start trying to push detoxification or even killing things, right? Like killing Lyme and co-infections, and we haven't given the body the fundamentals that it needs to start just being able to even detox, I'm going to make the patient sicker. I'm going to herx them like crazy. I'm going to drive up their inflammation, their overall toxic burden, oxidative stress. It's going to make mitochondrial function worse, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like, there's such an important point to preparing the body to receive the treatment by doing all of this groundwork or foundational work just to make sure the body is functioning properly.
And And what you're hitting on, what we're talking about is something that we're talking about things that are totally good and totally needed. But that is an art. I would say that it's not an exact science of okay, when do I do when do I give you these things? And, this is an example of when I give you things at the wrong time,
Yep.
that in one person's head, in one patient's head, you've given something that totally is beneficial, but in their head is a lasting effect of it didn't work for me or had regression effects.
Right.
And it's not a case of, is the therapy have merit like hyperbaric or or infrared sauna? It's just the fact that we have all of these therapies at our disposal, which are all inherently good. And one
Hmm.
of the benefits that we've kind of been able to observe through TruDOSE and watching patients heal, good and bad, is when do you give certain things?
And this
And
applies to TruDOSE too, right? I mean,
it
you
100% applies to TruDOSE.
right.
Um, Let me give you an example. Take PANS and PANDAS and autism, right? Though to the naked eye, I've seen enough of this to where you don't really know if PANS and PANS is there, even though if you've tested for it until that infectious load starts rearing its head, and you have this emotional response from the child that was otherwise there was nothing wrong with them. They have neurological problems. You have to, but is the PANS and PANDAS still there? What we've seen with just data collection is that if it's just autism, treatments 1, 2, 3, and beyond, there seems to be a linear improvement as far as the child being able to progress neurologically. Okay. Now that what that means is that there's probably been a lot of groundwork done by mom and the provider of getting rid of infectious load. They've probably cleared the terrain a lot. So there's probably not a lot of that infectious burden still there. But what we do see is a classic response of I have a child with autism, but there's still infectious load, is that the second treatment, after the first treatment's gone great, at the second treatment, there's this kind of just stirring up of all this infectious load trying to get out. And there's an emotional response. There's, tantrums and just what happened. This totally did not happen the first treatment. And in every case, it's because there's still, now whether it's PANS and PANDAS, but there's still infectious load that still needs to be dealt with.
Hmm.
Because the classic kind of provider responses. We got to detox. We got to get some glutathione. We've got to get the Epsom salt bath. We got to get this stuff out. So, um, so it's just our challenge. What we've seen with TruDOSE is just helping connect that education gap of what you're dealing with. Because if that response does happen at treatment 2, it's not a loss. It's now what you're dealing with. Now you have to get with the provider and say, all right, we need to get with some tinctures, some herbals. We got to get this stuff out. We just uncovered a problem we didn't know that was still there. So this narrows the focus.
So let's take a step back. Tell our listeners, what is TruDOSE exactly? And probably we should start out by defining what platelet rich plasma is and what it does.
So platelet-rich plasma is just scientifically defined as a high concentration of your body's own platelets circulating in your blood at a concentration of higher than your baseline platelet count. So if
Mhm.
you had a baseline platelet count of 300, technically platelet-rich plasma would be taking your blood from your arm, like drawing it from your arm, processing it in a centrifuge to remove all the components out to get just the platelets. And let's say that I gave you back a platelet, therapy of 600 platelets per mil versus your baseline blood count having 300. That would be by definition platelet-rich plasma. And what they've seen over the years is arguably it's the most widely studied therapeutic that exists within the medical literature. Every application you can think of, every specialty you can think of, but its applications have only known to be site specific for joints, for aesthetic based procedures. What I uncovered is, well, let's take these doses to dosings that we never thought we could achieve, well past what scientific literature knows is could be therapeutically applicable, and let's do this intravenously. And what we found is that if you do this at the right dose, what this is doing is basically creating the proportional um, stimulus of healing response, but the appropriate amount of recovery response. So there's your dose. There's enough response to generate healing that your body says, let's start working again. Let's start fixing things that I have yet to address and fix. But let's not do this end on end and keep me in this healing response to where I have, you know, herxing end on end. Or if I inject it into my knee, a healing response end on end would be creating hyper scarring. So too much dose would create hyper scarring. Too much dose, let's say intravenously, would again, in this case, create herxing where you can't get out of it. But what we've figured out is the right dose for certain conditions would stimulate the right amount of healing response, but the proportional amount of recovery response. So healing can look very comfortable, um, and not again create a situation where somebody's in a perpetual herxing reaction.
Right. And so what you developed with TruDOSE is the ability to see obviously like what the patient's, platelet volume is, but to know depending on what their diagnosis is or what you're trying to achieve, regarding the status of that individual patient sitting in front of you is the dose of platelets that need to go into the body to hit that sweet spot between promoting healing but not turning it on so much that we're creating, fibrosis and a cytokine cascade and like all of
Yes.
these other things that actually are already, for example, in patients that have chronic Lyme or chronic tick-borne disease, a lot of them are already in that immune imbalance where all of the cytokines are kicked on and the immune system is overly functioning to the body's detriment.
Essentially, the dosing, the very simplest way to understand dosing is which again is a problem that has existed within the medical literature since regenerative medicine came into existence. It's no The scientific literature simply did not say, hey, we should be determining, at what dose does it take to heal certain types of conditions. No one really asked that question that way. So what you had left with was treating patients basically the same way, whether they have, you know, a hurt knee or a hurt shoulder or, hair loss.
Yeah.
What I uncovered was, okay, using the software to determine the dose and then doing it intravenously. Uh, what it's essentially doing is restarting your body's immune system, you're restarting your body's repair system to start identifying priority of what do I fix first? What do I fix second? Because I'm the only one who knows the order in which I chose to selectively turn off the cellular functions and the organ functions as one person got to this chronic disease, Lyme or lupus or autism or whatever. And when you do this and you do this at the right dose at the right time, for example, somebody might walk into your office complaining of symptoms of, let's say, brain fog and fatigue and uh, joint pain right there, right?
Mhm.
So what you do is you treat the symptoms that they're dealing with, not the disease condition, because right then and there is the problem: brain fog, fatigue, and joint pain. It creates the healing response where those would hopefully get resolved. Typically they do. And then the next treatment, they're dealing with a whole nother set of symptoms. So essentially what you're doing is you're peeling back symptoms that you've acquired over a lifetime in the reverse order and almost which you acquired it. So if you do enough treatments, um, this question gets asked all the time, how many do I need? And we show them the chart and the graph. Essentially, you can keep doing this depending on how healed and healthy you want to get.
Yeah.
Because right?
Yeah. So, when I first was introduced to PRP, it was after I had a significant injury, a significant fall. I slipped on ice and I tore an annular, ruptured a disc, etc. And I got PRP injections into my disc actually to help healing. That's how I found it. And then I became fascinated with it. My understanding is that, the PRP is increasing growth factors and pulling stem cells, right? Like causing stem cells to come to the area of injury, kind of like almost like a magnet, right? And that's how a lot of like the regenerative healing process is, with a physical injury, or let's say in a joint or a tendon or something like that. So
Yeah,
do any of those mechanisms of action come into play when you are taking it intravenously, or is it a completely different mechanism?
it's both. And I'm glad you brought this up. We all think that it's not that it's bringing stem cells into play. The cell danger response, which we talked about a little bit ago,
Yep.
let's say that let's say you have you broke your arm.
Mhm.
Um, the body sets a time clock on how long it has to fix that. It doesn't do that indefinitely.
Yep.
And so it's going to allocate resources to fix it. And at that time, and guess who starts that time clock and identifies the injury? It's the platelets. If that time clock runs out and the fracture is not completely healed, it's going to basically cut its losses and move on to the next problem, which has now been created. So you've now the bone, the arm is now left to heal itself the best it can. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. And if it can't, what it's going to do is put some of those cells that are still in the danger response into basically hypersleep. Okay. It's
Mhm.
because the longer those cells stay in this mode of trying to heal itself, but I can't, the longer it stays in that mode, they can potentially become metabolically cancerous. So the body says, I don't want that to happen. Go into hypersleep, go into the bullpen. I'll call you when it's needed. And essentially, when you put the platelets back in, all that is kind of reset. It's like rebooting your computer to a previous time before you broke the arm. And
Yeah.
now it's able to say, okay, well, let me fix a few things right here. And then when I'm ready for you, stem cells, I'm going to call you in because there's several things I have to do first before I'm ready for you. And that's kind of the problem and the difference between stem cells is that the order of events in which our body heals itself is a sequential order that it doesn't deviate from. And stem cells are called into a repair, whether it's a brain injury, a fracture, an annular tear, Lyme disease, it doesn't matter. Their stem cells are called in at the end of, healing. Kind of like calling in, the trim guy when you're building a house. You don't do that at the beginning because there's a
Right.
whole set of things that have to happen. But if we give stem cells in the beginning, or when somebody's in a chronic loop of inflammation, then we've given stem cells at the wrong time. And so that's why sometimes they're rendered useless. But with the platelets, that whole sequence of event is basically restarted again.
Okay. So bring that back to the cell danger response. So how does TruDOSE help to heal that or fix that?
Because the cells in the bloodstream, they go into that mode of survival, but before they do that and they shut down their cell wall, they throw out the instructions of what they need to fix themselves. It could be mitochondrial support, it could be heat shock proteins, it could be a whole number of things. Guess who's the one thing scooping stuff up in the bloodstream when cells are not talking to one another? It's your platelets. And then your platelets scoop those instructions up. And then your bone marrow immediately responds by making platelets with those things in them. So the platelets can be seen. I've talked about them being seen as like Amazon trucks
Mm.
on demand, whatever this is, to be giving our cells what they need at that time so they can get out of that danger response and back into circulation so they can get back into the mode of helping the body operate. Um, but so the question is, well, why weren't the platelets doing that right now if they're in my body? It's not a question that they're not trying to do it. It's they already tried to do it at some
Right.
point. but now they're dealing with the next problem at the time in hand. And so they're only dealing with things right there in front of their eyes. But when you take that back, when you take the blood out of your body and give it back at the right dose, that healing response is happening, but the intelligence of what needs to be fixed first, second, third, fourth, and so on, that's being reset. So the body says, all right, you need this, you need that. These cells here that operate the brain, they need this, and this to come out of the danger response. Let me make the bone marrow start producing that right now.
Right. And there's also a difference. I mean, a big difference because, like, you gave the example of, from 300 to 600. We're not talking about just doubling the amount of platelets, right? Like, we're talking about exponentially. Like, it's a massive difference between the amount of platelets you would typically have in your blood volume and how much you're concentrating and putting back in.
Significant amounts, right?
Do you want to give a
And
ballpark for like
I
your
mean,
typical?
let's say if a if a if a couple billion platelets per mil will make the hair grow, then 5 billion platelets per mil will target, let's say, Lyme disease,
Right. So
right? So
again, I just wanted people to, we're not just doubling them. We are
yes. So let me
astronomically, exponentially
so
increasing.
if the average person has about 300,000 platelets
Hmm.
circulating in their bloodstream at one time per microliter,
Yep.
we're infusing back, that's 300,000 per microliter.
Yep.
We're infusing back, you know, in the billions, in the billions. So the body sees that as like, great, you just now put inside me the one thing that's responsible for restarting my repair system to start. And you
Hmm.
put in the one thing that's actually responsible for making my immune system to reactivate and restart again, which is the
Right.
platelets. And so basically you have, all this help that you never had before.
Right.
And yeah,
So I just want to make this point clear, and this may be to a lot of the medical practitioners that are listening, because, before I learned a lot about this, you would talk to me about the cancer dose, right? Or the mega dose, the biggest dose you would give someone. And, in my little smart head, I'm thinking, okay, well, like, why do I need your technology? I'll just, okay, if it's 6 billion that we're going through or going for, like, everyone's going to get 6 billion. So explain to the people that are listening, like, why is it important to know the sweet spot for that patient? Why don't you just want to give everyone like this mega dose or like the biggest dose that you can give to have the most effective, response of healing?
give the analogy, then I'll give the scientific. The analogy would be, I know that potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus will make my lawn green, right? I
Yep.
know if I get, I know, but I also know if I give my lawn, 20 nitrogen over a certain, pounds per square acre, it'll make my lawn really green. But if I
Mhm.
dump 20 nitrogen in one spot, it'll burn it
You're
and
going to
kill
burn
it.
it. Right.
So there's the analogy. And the scientific reason is because the way that our body actually functions is it responds to stress, right? You know, in information. If I do something to the body, it's going to respond to react and to learn. If a virus comes into the body, it's going to sense that stress. It's going to respond by saying, what is the virus trying to do to me? Intelligently, it's trying to do this. I know in the future I need to prepare for this, and that. That way, the next time I encounter the same strain, that I'm ready for it. The dosing has to do with, if I give somebody too much, again, the right amount of response to create healing, the right amount of response to um, uh, proportionally to offset that. If I have too low a dose, there won't be any type of healing happening. If I have too high a dose, I can leave this person into perpetual kind of healing that it can't, exit out of that cycle. So, you know, stressing your body too much, too much.
Right.
It's like going to the gym and doing squats every day. You'll never give the body a time to recover.
Right.
So the dose has to relate to the right amount of stimulus response that the body responds to, say, Lyme or lupus or whatever the neurological condition is, but it has to have the appropriate amount of dosing, that range,
Yep.
so it doesn't leave them in, say, perpetual healing.
Right.
Either
And
one
it's
of
also
those.
patient specific. So it's not like you can just have a chart that it's this much for Lyme, it's this much for lupus, it's this much for, right? It also has to do with that particular patient's platelet count, right? And everything else that's going on with them. Like there's an
That's the
actual formula.
there's
Yeah.
like a whole algorithm and metrics that's on the back end. There's now evidence coming out, if anybody wanted to look up, that platelets can be, let's say, a biomarker for, say, autism disease. There's actually a study that just published that says, hey, maybe it potentially can. I can tell you for certainty that platelets could be a biomarker of where are you in a disease state? How
Yeah.
healthy are you? Um, and so using that, the single platelet count, but all the metrics on the back end to determine a patient-specific treatment is what goes into the software. What the software can't know, and it won't know unless you tell it, is what are you dealing with right now? Those
Right.
inputs have to occur. So there's at least somewhere to start.
Right. So
Because,
share with me, I know you've been working on a lot of studies. Is there anything you'd like to share with the listeners of any of the I don't know if it's too soon.
well, I can let everybody know we're getting ready to launch the autism study. We're
So
getting ready
so
to launch.
exciting.
Oh my gosh, we're getting ready to do the one on COVID long haulers with all the practitioners.
Yeah.
So those are we've already had one in female sexual dysfunction. We've already had one in, say, sports medicine applications. But now it's time to do ones that are really more focused to the problems we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
And, you know, given the climate, hopefully the healthcare climate will change, is changing,
It is
um,
changing.
is changing.
It's
This will be a
changing.
time to where we'll actually start releasing the actual data of what we were going to see in autism, which again will start here hopefully I would say another month.
Yeah. Great. Any studies in, with Lyme and tick-borne disease in the works?
Right after I had somebody spilling me. Actually, yes, that's right on the heels. I would say late spring we'll have our Lyme one
Great.
uh, out of the gate. I know that's
Awesome.
been kind of much waited and much anticipated. Um, so it's just like, when was the thing is it with us, when is the right time to do it? And so
Yeah.
having a lot of these changes that, the new climate, hopefully with the administration, this is the right time to now start doing that.
Yeah. It certainly is. Well, anything that you would like to share additionally with the listeners before you let them know how to find more information about yourself and TruDOSE, and if they're looking to actually experience TruDOSE for themselves or a loved one, any other insights you'd like to impart on our listeners?
I would, I would say that I hope that this podcast that we're doing conveys that there's a lot of therapies out there that are really, really good. Detoxing and infrared sauna and herbals and nutrition, those are all, TruDOSE is not the only thing you need. Okay. And I'm not biased enough to say TruDOSE works best when you know which of these things to use and when to use them, when to
Right.
use before, what to use after. TruDOSE fits in the middle. And then as you move along, what modalities that you do as you start to heal, because as you start to heal, you should start to shed away some of the things that you were using and move on to things that are a little different. Again, stress, you have to give the body stresses. So um, that's a topic that's very obviously nuanced and very um, that you can't unpack in one, say, podcast, but it's to let everybody know that these therapies do work. And if you are experiencing, good effects or even bad effects, both of those scenarios are probably indications that the things are working. It's just maybe it's just something that you haven't traditionally been experiencing if you've never done integrative medicine.
Yeah. I like to explain it to a lot of patients. I'm like, you have like building a house, right? Like you have to build a house in a certain order or it's not going to stand, right? It's not going to you can't put the roof on until you've poured the foundation and done the framing, right? Like you can't put the plumbing in the house or the electricity if it doesn't have the frame to run it through, right? So it's like there are steps and stages that have to sort of be followed and they're going to be different, a lot of times with different individuals, but it's kind of like you have to get into this order and this sequence. And
Yes.
again, I believe of actually getting the fundamentals of the body to work as correctly as you can in a sick, inflamed, infected body.
Yep.
But, like you have to go kind of like in the right order, so to speak, for that person.
And I'm just throwing it out there because I know that, you know, that a patient on the other end living in a particular city or state is going to go this place and that place and this place to do a lymphatic massage, or they go here to do infrared sauna, or they go here only to get TruDOSE, and they go here to do their nutrition coach. And those are all great. If there's no battle plan in when you're doing these, you could be potentially doing great things in
Yeah.
orders that aren't when you need them.
Right.
And so you know what I'm trying to say.
I do 100%. Yeah.
So
All right. Well, let our listeners know how they can find more information about TruDOSE.
so TruDOSE.com. Um, a whole new website's coming. We're going to have a community page where people can start finding even more information. We are going to be launching more things that we've kind of kept close to the vest this year. And so everybody, if you go to TruDOSE.com, it won't look like it does, let's say now, say 6 months from now. And hopefully we'll be sharing a lot more with everybody in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tapley, for joining me. And thank you to all of the listeners at home for joining us. And I hope that this episode has brought you information that helps you on your journey to healing from Lyme. Take care. Bye bye.